The Roundtable is back on today's Season 6 finale of the Producer Podcast, as we're looking at the topic of leading a healthy lifestyle, both on-set and off-set. Joining us today, we have producers Hannah Bartlett and Micah Gerber, as well as health coach and filmmaker Sarah Beth. So without further ado, let's get started. Thank you all for coming on the show today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. So maybe to start, Sarah, because you're the only one in this group that hasn't been on the show before, just take a minute or two to introduce yourself to listeners.
Yeah, my name is Sarah Beth, and I am a certified natural health professional and a health coach. That's my health side of things. And then as far as film, I'm an actress, but I've also directed before and written and done most every little tiny job on the film set. I think I haven't worked in sound. I think that's the one department that I determined I've never worked in. So I need to do that at some point before I die. But I also have a company called Time is Short Health, and I like working with people to help them reach their health goals and to heal from disease or whatever it is that they need. And I actually work at a women's clinic here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. But I'm also passionate about helping people understand how to stay healthy before they go onto a film set. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. Like the three areas that I kind of wanted to cover was the physical, the mental, and then the spiritual side. Because at least for me, the longer I've worked in film, the more you kind of see how much they're all connected. But I think maybe the best place to start would be with the physical side. And I think specifically like before you step foot on set, like what things should you be doing either when you're just at home in pre-production, or maybe you don't even have a project, to create those healthy habits and get you in that healthy state before you go step onto a crazy film set life?
Practice by only sleeping 2 hours out of every 24. No, I'm joking.
Don't do that.
Totally kidding. Don't do that. I would say the biggest thing that you should do is, like you said, creating healthy habits, which I think is so important, because when we go into a film set, we're immediately under pressure and we're, time restraints, all these other things. We're in a different place. We don't have control over most of the areas of our life, if you will, when we're on a film set. So if we don't have a habit in place before we step onto that film set, then any healthy choices that we would want to make totally go out the window. And there's also something that's called decision fatigue that we get as a day moves on. So at the beginning of the day, it's much easier to make healthy decisions. And as the day goes on and we make so many decisions over and over and over again, for us, for the production, for so many other things, by the end of the day or by mid-afternoon, sometimes that is completely exhausted and we can't make healthy decisions anymore. It takes so much energy. So if we walk into a film set creating healthy habits, I think that's like the number one way to live a healthy lifestyle, is like, I have a habit of, this is what I do. I do this. I drink my water every day. I eat this kind of food. I do have this kind of fitness, and I try to maintain that in my life. And then when you step onto the set, it's already second nature.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, as you step onto that set, don't forget about the things that you do during your everyday life. So like, as you're going, you're building those habits of exercise. I was really, probably when I was more full-time in the film industry, that was where I did not do well at all. I was very sporadic. I did not create a schedule for myself. And so I would just wake up whenever I wanted, stay up as late as I wanted. And so when you got into the film set scenario, it was very like, oh, I'll force myself to do it when I have to do the things but it was so hard after I got off that set to then recover, because I didn't have those things in place, which affects a lot of mental, for sure.
Yes.
And you're not prepared energy wise or anything for that future. But one of the big things that I kind of worked with was, as you prepared health wise, right, going into it, that I continue to do that. So if I'm working out every day in some way. While I was on film, doing films more, I was doing a lot more daily workouts, strength exercises, things like that. Well, I was on set, I was doing grip and electric a lot. So I was lifting a lot, I was moving a lot. Great. I thought I was okay. Eventually, I had to realize, nah, you need to do stretches, you need to do some things on set as well. So, but building a habit where you actually want to. I think we can get to an area in our lives where we just like, I don't want to. I don't want to. And so creating things that are actually a habit to the point where it's enjoyable. And so figuring out what those things are. So I know people who they don't touch with a 10-foot pole the strength exercises. So, machines, weightlifting, things like that. But they'll do yoga all day. That's their thing. Well, if that's your thing, like, okay, take that, apply it, because what you want to do is make sure that you're keeping your body active, energy, because however much it's like another kind of lie that I believed definitely on set was that, oh, I'm active, I'm constantly moving during the day, I'm healthy. And I was forgetting so much of the things like a lot of like targeted exercise. And so, yes, I was kind of moving, but it didn't mean that I was doing the things that were keeping my body intact. In fact, I kind of got to a point that there were several injuries because I didn't do that well, because grip and electric specifically targets a ton of specific muscles, particularly in your lower back. And so you can damage your lower back very easily.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything like both of you guys were saying there. And I think it's important to like have that storehouse built up while you are at home. So making sure when you are at home that you're getting a good 8 hours of sleep, that you're eating healthy, that you're setting those habits, kind of like Sarah was saying, like just set those habits at home, because it is going to be depleted on set. Like no matter, even if it's the best run set ever, it's still going to be, there's just stress just comes along with filmmaking, and that's kind of part of the job to some degree. So if you know it's coming and it's expected to be there to some degree, right? Like how can you be thinking ahead and building that up while you're home so that you feel rested coming into it, getting regular sleep and eating healthy and all those things, and then thinking how can you carry over those habits, but not beating yourself up if you don't. So like, for example, if you choose to eat really healthy at home because you're able to cook your own meals or you're able to do these different things, well, it's not always possible on set. So just thinking ahead of like, how can I carry over these habits onto the film set? Like maybe just making decisions ahead of time on some of the choices. Like, okay, I'm going to try to eat more of these types of food while I'm on set, choose healthier snacks or whatever, be drinking enough water. And then that can even be applied spiritually too, like making sure that when you are at home, you're having, your regular time with the Lord and prayer. And you maybe don't always have time to do that for an hour every morning while you're on set, but could you bring along a devotional that takes 2 minutes to read? Or could you every morning, pray before going on set, whatever, like what are some of those things you can make sure you have a full storehouse of while you're at home, and then apply them at a smaller percentage while you're on set?
And Sarah's probably the pro on this, not me. But the other thing that I ran into a lot, and I'll still run into this a lot, is that I will overcompensate for my on-set experience, right? So on my on-set, I'm like, oh, I'm getting 4 hours of sleep. When I get off-set, I need to be sleeping 10, 12 hours, or, there's just a lot of any one of those areas you can kind of overcompensate in a sense of like, or whenever I'm offset, I'm sleeping a lot longer. The thing is, like, at least in my moderate study of the subject, that's not healthy either, to oversleep, overdo that preparatory either.
Right. If we come off of an extremely stressful set where we're getting like, 4 hours of sleep a night, there might be a sleep debt is what it's called, where like maybe for a couple of days after, or maybe for a week after we get off set, we might add an hour of sleep onto our sleep time to like get back into the swing. But yeah, if we're like oversleeping all the time and then we go on to a set and we're getting like 3 or 4 hours of sleep, that doesn't work out very well. And yeah, I want to piggyback on what Hannah was saying about like when we step onto a set, we don't have control of what food is there. And yes, beating ourselves up about that doesn't make it better. And I think the hardest thing is like the craft services table a lot of times, because when we are very tired and we've only slept 4 hours, a lot of times we go for quick energy, which is a lot of times like sugar and carbs. Um, my really big tip is I would say like 100% if you're trying to have sustainable energy on set and you don't have control of all the choices, but if you try to focus on protein and fats instead of going for carbs, which is what we want to go for, but it's not the best. But if we're used to getting our energy from protein and carbs before we get on the set, and then when we're on the set, we're like, oh, I really need this. We're going to have much more sustainable energy instead of like 30 minutes of like, yay, I have energy. And then we just, slump again. Okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think making those choices like ahead of time can be helpful because, when you get on set and it's like all going out to eat and snacks and like all this stuff, it's like, okay, well, that looks really good, so I'm just going to have it. It's still good to have fun while you're on set and enjoy those things. So be thinking about ahead of time, like, especially if you're on set regularly, some people like with our line of work, we're typically maybe on set like 4 to 6 times a year. It's some people that's all they do all year long, so be thinking like, okay, how can I make those decisions ahead of time? Like, okay, I'm going to try to have more salads for my lunches or, more of those proteins and fats, things you were talking about, Sarah. But then also at the end of the shoot, like, we're going to have a wrap party. I'm going to have some ice cream. We're going to have fun with that. Like, but if you make those choices ahead of time, it's easier to then maintain that.
Well, and I think too, Hannah, you mentioned stress, and it's a reality of the film world. I haven't met a filmmaker who hasn't dealt with stress at some level. Even the jobs that you think are chill, nope. It doesn't matter what area you're in. So I know for me, one of the things I really worked on was kind of creating this sounds so weird, but a stress bank. Almost, we talked about a sleep bank, some of those kind of things, right? But as you go into a set, understanding it, creating habits of how you're dealing with stress, because the reality is we deal with stress in our daily lives all the time, but we tend to react better to it, right? We tend to take the time and react to it. On set, we don't. And so a lot of times we can kind of build up this, we can tend to react rather than respond, maybe is a great term there. And so one of the things that I know I had to work on a lot was understanding how to prepare well, because what I wanted to do was make sure that my life was stress-free when I wasn't on set. Because I was more full-time where I was on set after set after set. And it was hard because I was like, well, I just want to not think about anything. And I know several people who are that way, we worked on that, is where it's like, I want to be stress-free because I have a very stressful job. So I'm going to remove as much stress as possible. And the reality is that's not preparing you well for that stressful scenario. And so a lot of times, especially for producers, but I think anyone on set, but I think producers specifically, because so much of the job of a producer is having a good response and setting up the tone of the entire set. That's the goal of a producer. And so if we're not building up that bank of healthy responses to stress, I think we can really damage ourselves. And honestly, it's not going to turn out well on set in that stress scenario that, something breaks. It's the reality.
I guess I have a couple questions. What's like one of each of your habits that like you do at home that like this is one you do keep when you go to set?
For me, it was probably that the stress one, because so not many people see this side of me, but I can get very frustrated. I can also tend to be very intense when I get very focused. And so there have been moments where I have not reacted the best way to scenarios. maybe the term more on secular sets, I can be very unchristian uh, in a scenario. And so really working on, even in my quiet times, things like that on the offset times, preparing myself well to be the mild-mannered person that I am, of being chill, being, not reacting in anger to scenarios, but saying, hey, here's how we can, adapt this. But just building that response, so that I knew how to properly deal with a scenario. And education really was key too. It's very easy to learn when you're on set because you're in a stressful scenario, so your brain tends to just kick in and learn. But continual learning, I think, was something that I also carried through and still do.
I would say, I can think of two things. One of them on the physical side of things, which is drinking water, because you have to drink water and you can't just drink coffee and you can't just drink soda. You have to drink water. So when I'm on a set, I am very conscious of how much I've been drinking, so that I make sure I hit, 50% of my body weight in fluid ounces every day. If you're on a set where it's very warm, or you're doing a lot of physical activity, that's going to need to go up.
Gatorade too.
That's bad for you. No, okay. Water's better, but yes. But just making sure you're getting your electrolytes and make sure you're staying hydrated, and Coke and coffee do not hydrate you, is extremely important. And it's important in the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual sense, because physically your body needs water. Emotionally, if your body doesn't have water, your body is going to go into a certain reaction to that, as well as spiritually. If your body doesn't have water, you are going to feel a certain way. And I think that has an effect on that. And then my second thing was, when my alarm would go off, I would immediately read a chapter of the Bible, immediately on my phone. I would usually be sharing a room with people. It'd be very dark, so I would have it on my phone, and I would do it first thing, because I personally knew that if I didn't sit up in bed and do that, it wasn't going to happen. So those were the two things that every film set, I would drink my water, and then I would have the water of the word.
And I feel like there's so much I'm still learning, like in all of these different categories of how do I keep these habits and, make things happen on set. I feel like one for me is not having too much sugar, because I'm gluten-free, just not by choice, but health issues and different things. Well, and by choice, because it is better for you, but
yes,
gluten-free, and also don't have too much sugar. So like, for example, kind of like Sarah was saying, like I do typically at home, we drink water as our main drink, and I'm also doing that on set. And then also on set, I'm not choosing the snacks and the stuff with sugar, or when dessert is offered, I usually don't have it, just because I know when my body is getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep, like I need 8 to 9. I'm one of those people that I really need 8 to 9. And when I'm getting 4 to 5 hours of sleep and I'm having sugar and it's stressful, like sugar can raise my anxiety. It can like really lower my immune system. Like that's a huge one that it's almost like out of necessity. I'm like, I know I cannot have too much sugar right now because it's just not going to go well. So it's helpful that we don't do that at home, and then also don't do it on set, because it's easier. I'm not craving it as much because I'm able to kind of keep that consistent.
And then I guess kind of tying into what you were saying there, Hannah, my other question was in regards to like eating healthy. Because one of like the unique things I had this past year was several projects where I was like for weeks on end in just a hotel where it's like all you have is a microwave and like a small fridge, or maybe just, a 1-burner stove. And it's like, how do you go about still eating healthy when a lot of the things that like at home I would make, I just don't have the ability to. So I don't know, like what are maybe some of your like go-to healthy food options that you can easily keep on hand when you don't have the space to prepare them?
It's going to take a little bit more time, but thinking through like, okay, how can I really search at like the grocery store or whatever for something that's maybe more organic or has less ingredients in it? So like Something Andrew and I like is like these apple chicken brats. They're already fully cooked, but they're pretty healthy. They don't have a lot of junk in them. They're organic, and it's easily something you can throw in the microwave or whatever if you need to, but you're getting protein, you're getting those different things that you need. And then instead of like, I feel like there are convenience foods that are offered that are more healthy. That, you know, they're maybe still not the first choice compared to raw whole foods, but there is stuff, if you look for it, that you can find that if you need convenience, you need to use that microwave or whatever, it's going to cost a little more, but I think it's worth it, you know, to look for stuff with less ingredients, maybe organic, that is, you know, more convenience foods, or like fruits and vegetables, stuff that you can be eating raw, looking for snacks that don't have the high fructose corn syrup and less sugars and all of those stuff that's easy to eat, but still healthy. And then also don't beat yourself up again if you do need to just grab something that is maybe not as healthy as you would like. You need to use the microwave or do those different things. Like, that's okay. That's kind of part of set life, but doing the things you can in those small ways can make a difference. Grabbing some carrots and some apples and some whatever, you know, to kind of go along as a side.
Yeah. And I would say too, if you're walking into that grocery store and you know that you need to find some healthier foods that are going to give you real energy, is like always shop the perimeter of the store. Be that kind of like your key of, I'm going to try to grab foods from only the perimeter of the store and make meals that I know I can make in my hotel room. And it's fun. It's, you know, like, oh, this is a challenge, but around the perimeter of the store, you're going to have fruits and vegetables and meats and cheeses and different things like that. Whereas once you enter to the center of the grocery store, that's when you're going to have packaged foods, processed foods. And like Hannah said, there's totally a place where you're like, hey, I just have to grab something, you know, I'm just going to grab this quick thing. And that's totally fine. But being able to be like, okay, I'm in a hotel room. I know I have these things available to me, or I'm in, you know, crew housing and I know we have like this in the kitchen, so I can probably cook this way. And I only have like 10 minutes, or I only have 30 minutes, or whatever it may be. And then entering the perimeter and going like, oh yeah, there's some cheese over here. There's some nice meats that aren't super processed, but I don't have to cook them, like, you know, sandwich meats or something like that. I can grab this fruit. And one of the biggest like superfoods that takes zero cooking are avocados. They're not just trendy, they're actually really good for you. So you can grab some avocados and, you know, put an avocado on everything. And then you're getting some really healthy fats, and it's green. So that's good. It's kind of hard to eat green sometimes. So shopping that perimeter of the store and creating something, it always depends on what you have access to cook, and then like how much time you have, but that's a good just rule of thumb.
Well, let me add too, like if this is something that's maybe new to somebody, they're like, okay, I want to start eating healthy, but this is kind of a lot. Like, start looking for those things while you're at home, while you're not on set. Like, go to the store and be like, oh, what are some ideas? Try some stuff out, see what you like and don't like. Because I know how stressful it is on set when you're like, okay, I'm starving, it's late, it was a long day, you know, whatever. But if it takes intentionality, which takes more time. But if you're able to do that, like while you're at home and not as stressed, and kind of figure out what you like, and what some good options are, then when you are on set, you can just run into the store, you kind of know what you're going for, and get it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side to all of that, so a lot of times, or at least in my experience, I wasn't even in a hotel room with that stuff. Oftentimes I didn't have anything, like anywhere. I had a bed. That's what I had. And so it was like I was stopping at fast food a lot. And so what was it, you know, what were decisions on set? The number one thing that's usually left over after a meal is not the pasta, not it's the salad. And so, you know, and namely, if you're going to take seconds, but even in the first, you know, get more of that. They're never going to be, or if it's not in crafty, ask for it. That, you know, in the sense of crafty for lunches, because that's part of it. Doesn't matter how cheap the set is. I've been on this full spectrum. So you can always ask for that. Just say, hey, can we have some salad with the meals? Talk to a producer. That's part of the producer's job, is to make sure that we're on a healthy set. And so that was something, several sets I said, hey, can we make sure we have salad here, like specifically for this group. And that's just even if you eat the main thing. So I ate all the pastas and things like that. And even though I don't eat like that quite as much anymore, just even eating a bit of salad, things like that to get that way. And if you don't like salad, choosing veggie trays, some of that kind of stuff, start to like salad. That might be helpful too. Uh, I don't like avocados, so that's
Oh no.
probably an angle. I had to figure things out that I could do. Hummus was a huge,
Mhm.
it's an easy one you can have in the fridge, in the mini fridge or whatever. And you can get a lot of variety, I love the veggie straws, or rice cakes are another great snack. They last a long time. They don't spoil easy. So those are a couple of things. And then when you go to fast food, because the reality is you will. I can guarantee it doesn't matter how healthy you are, it doesn't matter how far you're going to end up, because you're going to get off at 2 a.m. in the morning, and the only thing that's going to be open is a Taco Bell and a Wendy's or something, something like that. So a couple of options there. When I go to Taco Bell, getting it they call it fresco there. But like basically any Mexican restaurant, you can go, instead of getting their, probably the worst part of a lot of those things is the meat that isn't actually meat dish stuff in them. And so when you get it fresco or something like that, you're getting it a lot more straight, or choosing a salad option that they have. So the Wendy's options, there's a baked potato there. That's a great option. It's a stronger carb out of the options probably. And then there's also salads usually, even that late into the evening. And so it's really easy to go get the dollar cheeseburgers, things like that, and go there. Oh, it's easy to eat while I'm driving. Get it, but like choosing those meals, even when you're like, oh, I have to go fast, and making those decisions right leading in, like you guys were saying, sugar, things like that, making those decisions leading up allows for you to make those decisions when you're in that scenario. 4 a.m., you're tired, you don't really want to have to think about this, and you're just like, a cheeseburger sounds really, really, really good. But if you prepared yourself for this scenario, right? And you know how to self-talk yourself into a thing that'll be better for you even. And then the other thing, I think part of that too is a lot of times on set, we get our meals. I definitely had this, where I would get my meals and they would be the correct amount of calories. I've eaten my calories for the day, but I've gone a little longer, right? And maybe I didn't get that second meal that I wish I could have had. But I choose to have another meal on top of that, especially right before I go to bed, which I've learned now, specifically for me, and I think it's generally for most people, is not super healthy to eat right before bed. It does not help you to sleep well at all. And I definitely ran into that a lot, where I was eating. I would get, I had a 30-minute drive, so I'd stop somewhere on the drive back and I'd get something to eat, and then I'd go immediately to bed. And that was just not a healthy decision, right? That it doesn't matter what food you're eating at that point. But it is good to hydrate and stuff, I would say, in that scenario. Like if you're hungry at that point, like figure out how to, grab a bottle of water from Crafty before you go. Do those kind of things. Also make sure, this is something that I also ran into a lot. A lot of times they can go over in meal times and stuff. You may have a meal penalty scenario where you're going 30, 40 minutes past, and depending on who you are and how your body reacts to food, blood sugar and things like that can be a reality. Make sure you're being conscious of, especially on sunny days, that you're getting some time in the shade, that you're constantly getting water. And if it's really bad, like I was in doing a feature, I was key gripping, and it was in North Carolina, and it was, man, I want to say 102 degrees outside. We were doing exteriors, 102 degrees, and water just was not cutting it. And I realized that for the most part, I'm not a Gatorade person. I don't love Gatorade, but I legitimately told the crafty person, I was like, we need something here, because we're losing more than we can put in. And so be conscious of some of those scenarios, because water is really, really good, but sometimes you're getting so much deficit that you do need that extra push from things like Pedialyte and water.
I want to kind of pivot now to a little bit more the mental like stress management side. Obviously, I think just about all of you have already touched on that or brought it up. But I guess like one thing I'd be curious to kind of hear is just like, what are things that you found help you deal with stress while on set?
This was a huge one. I was on a set, and it was probably one of the harder sets I've been on as far as the job I was doing. And it was extremely stressful. And there would be moments where I'm an extroverted person. So I like talking to people. I like interacting with people. But when you notice a moment in you where you're the opposite of what you normally are, where you're specifically personality wise, right? You're the opposite of how you normally react to a scenario. This is probably a good moment to take a minute, and that might be probably by yourself. Or potentially if you're an extreme introvert and you're realizing, ooh, this is not a healthy, maybe you need to be with people, right? And you're trying to withdraw so much. So I think there's something, for me, it was a reaction where I was not reacting well to the scenario. I also don't cry very often. And, when I'm ready to cry, it's okay to walk away from that scenario, take a minute and come back. Or if you're really angry, that can be a thing too. Like something went wrong, you may be at fault, or someone else may be angry with you. It's okay to say, hey, can we take a minute? I'm going to walk away, process that scenario, and then come back with a clearer head. Because sometimes the stress scenarios, it's very easy to be reactive. And when we're at home, it's much easier to take, because we have that time. It's much easier to maybe take 10 seconds. We don't have as much stress on either end of it. And so, or we didn't maybe work as hard on the thing. So I know it's a lot of times on set, I'd work really hard on something and then someone would be like, that's absolutely garbage. And it was like, are you kidding me? Right. And so you don't have that as much at home usually. And so taking that time to just say, hey, I'm going to go process this first and then come back and react can be really good.
I completely agree. And in the same way, like it depends on, like it's, whether you're talent or you have a specific crew position, like sometimes you have more freedom to just be like, hey, I'm going to need a second. And then, or not even announce it, maybe just be like, tell one person, I'm going to go outside for a second, but like going outside in fresh air, if that's available, which is not always available, even for like 2 minutes, and just taking a deep breath and understanding that everyone else on that set is probably also having a stressful day. So a lot of times if someone reacts to you in a certain way, 9 times out of 10, someone just did that to them. And we react by doing it to someone else. And so sometimes just being able to step away and being able to forgive that person because that that's probably what happened. And then saying, I'm not going to do that to the next person who comes to me. There are cases of actual abuse on set. And if something wrong is going wrong, you absolutely, protect yourself and you step up and you tell the person you need to 100%. But a lot of times on set, we're all stressed and someone turns and speaks harshly to this person. And then that person turns and speaks a little bit more harshly to the next person and so on and so forth. So being able to step away, I like to just go outside for a second and be like, okay, fresh air, I'm good, everything's fine. And then just like walk back in. That's incredibly helpful for me.
Yeah. And I think like, how can you be thinking even like ahead of the set, like ahead of time, what are things that typically stress me out and how can I prevent that if possible, right? So like making sure that the crew, like, because as a producer for me and AD and stuff, like making sure that the crew does have good lodging and a good place where if they need to, for the most part, try to make it where they can go off to the room and shut the door if they just need in the evening, need some time alone to process or whatever. And then also making sure that you have enough people on set. Now it's never enough budget, never enough people and all that. But, for me, I've learned through some very stressful set situations that like, I can't handle it all myself. And maybe next time I need to hire an extra person to be on my team, so what are that's sometimes how I think about it, like ahead of time is like, okay, who do I need on my team? Because I know where my limits are. And I usually always reach my limits anyway, because the sets end up being like a lot, of work. But just thinking like, okay, who do I need on my team? How can I, do all that? And I think something, because like the stress and the mental side of it is a huge issue for me and something I'm definitely like working on and working through still. And something that I want to work on that I think is helpful for anybody in any position is talk to the Lord about it. Like I've seen so many times every single set when we've had a stressful situation come up, God has worked it out and it's worked out and it's been fine. And there's been moments where like, how are we going to get this shot? This is not going to work. Like literally this thing went wrong, whether that be with paperwork side of things or weather or whatever. And it's like, this is not going to work. How are we going to make this happen? And every time like the Lord comes through. And so just going, okay, reminding yourself in that moment of stress when everything's not going right. He's done it before. He will do it again. Take a minute, go to him first and just say, Lord, can you help us to work through this, and trusting him with that. And that's something I'm definitely working on.
I think it's also good before you go to a set, especially if you know it's going to be a longer set, to have a person that you're like, hey, I'm going to be on this set for like a month, or, something like that. And like, I was just wondering if I ever just need someone to talk to, would it be okay if I call you? I think that's very important to have, because sometimes we just need someone separate from everything to just be like, hey, and they can say like, hey, can you check on me every once in a while and just see how I'm doing if I don't call you? And then they can check on you. And then sometimes just having someone text you and be like, hey, do you want to talk this evening? And you can just say like, yeah, it's just been a really stressful week, and just having them to talk to is really good. I think we should also protect ourselves when we're talking to our fellow crew members and talent, that we don't gossip, because I think that totally it changes our mindset and it changes their mindset. And I don't think it's very helpful and healthy for the whole crew. So we have to protect ourselves from gossip. But at the same time, if we do need to say like, okay, this isn't going well, we need to make sure we work it out so that we all work more effectively together as a team. Just watch that line. It's very particular. It moves a lot. So like watch when you're gossiping, because you just need to not stress and you just need to vent to someone, or you just gossiping. Like being careful with that is really important too.
I would say two pieces kind of touching off of that, Sarah, is just we don't have problems, we have opportunities. And I think that's a huge part for especially the leadership on set. But no matter what position you're in, PA to, small child on set. I've had that before where they were just like, you really need to chill out. Like, and when the kid notices, yeah, you need to go take a second, right? But I think part of that is crew reflects leadership a lot. And so if the leadership is stressed out, if the leadership communicates a lot of negativity, if the leadership is very blatant about gossip to some extent, but they're very open about conversating about people's problems, then it's very easy for the crew to pick that up. And if they're not actively killing that, that, if they're hearing things like part of a producer's job, right? An AD's job, anyone who's in higher level leadership in the set, their job is to hear the tenor of the of the group of the crew, and to see whether it's on target. And so to prep in advance, to plan, this is what we want to be like. And that's going to be a little different for each set, but there are some principles, right? So looking at things as opportunities. So yeah, we have this setback. Let's have it an opportunity to glorify Christ, obviously. We want that there, but also an opportunity to grow, because something went wrong. It may not be anyone's direct fault. It may be everyone's fault, but it can be fixed. There's nothing that can't be fixed. Even if it looks like it's impossible, right? It can be fixed. Or there might be an option where it's like, yeah, we didn't really need to do that. We don't really need to go there. Let's just go this route. And it turned out better. there's a lot of factors that I think a lot of times in our failure, we realize the good thing that we were missing. Uh, and it's odd, but it's very rewarding when you find that, where it's like we do fail and then we see, wow, why didn't we do it that way? And it's fascinating when that happens. But I think, yeah, the two pieces are definitely making sure that even as a crew member that you're leading, the lowest level crew member that you're leading in setting that tenor, understanding even if the main level leadership isn't doing a good job, that you're setting a tenor of like, hey, exuding that joy, but also that um, mindset of, hey, we can resolve this. We can do this. This is possible. I think that helps a lot mentally, tremendously, to have that mindset. Because if you're constantly looking at problems, you're going to run into problems, mentally and physically, all these things, because you're just going to take that stress onto yourself.
Yeah. And if there is something that is like bothering you and it's continuing to bother you, it's not just a small thing that you can look over, like go to the person and mention. I think communication is a huge part of that. You know, being mentally not as stressed is like, especially as the leadership, like encouraging there to be that clear communication, and kind of the Matthew 18 of like, okay, if somebody did something that was really hurtful or whatever, going to them privately and saying, hey, like, can we work through this? Because if you're hiding it under the rug and going through the entire set, just letting that bitterness build and build, that's not healthy for you or anybody else, you know? So making sure that you are communicating. And as crew, if the leadership is, you know, not providing healthy boundaries like of work hours and different things like that, you know, talking to them about it, bringing that up. And as leadership, making sure in pre-production that you are planning for healthy work hours and healthy foods and like all of those scenarios that are going to provide the best atmosphere for people to be happy and feel rested. And not like, you know, creating a bad environment for it to be hard for everybody to be, you know, making good choices. And if they're low on sleep and, you know, way overworked, it's going to be a lot harder for people to mentally not be as stressed.
There was a book I read about the beginning of the film world and the 5 major film production companies, right? And one of the comments in that book, which was profound, I was like, this is an odd thing to note, is that film from its beginning origin was built on a vindictive mindset. Because these 5 major companies all started because they were trying to get back at one another. And so it's a very interesting way for film to have started. But I think it's continued, right? We talked about gossip. We talked about some of these areas, but I think one of the biggest things too of thinking through is you have your opportunities, you have your don't gossip, but all of those things, when we have a negative perspective, it's because to some extent we're trying to be vindictive. And a lot of times we can have that with leadership, where like we disagree with leadership, so we're going to not do our job as well. We disagree with leadership, so we're going to let everyone know that we disagree with that, you know, oh, they're so bad or so, whatever it is, that's gossip, or we just end up complaining about everything. I think gossip and complaining go hand in hand, and it's everywhere. But also making sure that we aren't even outside of set. I think gossip on set is very common, but I think gossip outside of set too, of like we call it debriefing, and I don't think it usually is debriefing. As much as it is us just saying all the things that we've built up over that time. And so having healthy ways of decompressing what we're dealing with, the emotions that we run into.
So I guess the next kind of piece of this, I'd say, looking more at the spiritual side, just like I'd love to hear how you guys, I know Sarah, you kind of talked about already, you know, you always read a chapter of the Bible when you wake up, but like what things do you do on set? Because I know even though I'm really good at home, it's so easy for me to not keep that habit up, you know, on set. And I mean, thankfully, one of the few, I would say, good things out of 2020 is now so many churches have the live stream. So like it's easy, to watch, whether it's your home church or somebody else's online, if that's all you have time for, which is something like my church a couple years ago I wasn't able to do when I was away on set. But yeah, what are some things you all do to stay spiritually healthy while on set?
Oh, I was going to say, like Hannah said, I think it is so true that if we're dealing with a situation, we give it to the Lord. And also that if we're having an amazing time on set, we praise the Lord that we're there. And just being able to spend time in prayer. A lot of times film life can be hurry up and wait. And so sometimes we're just hanging out for a certain amount of time. So we can either get our phone out and just sit there and scroll for that 5-minute break. Or we can spend time with the Lord and just make sure that we're not, when we're at home, we're reading God's word and we're spending time with him in prayer, and we're spending time with our, church family and all that kind of thing. And then we go to set, it's just like gone. I think that can be dangerous. And like you said, it is such a blessing that now we actually have access to churches online. So if we're traveling and if we're, for a Sunday, we're not near home and, like I just don't have the bandwidth to, find a church and I don't want to just drive to the one on the street corner, I'm going to listen to my home church. I think that's really good too. And don't let Sunday just pass as another day. Like have it be a day that you're like, you take and you give it to the Lord. And sometimes on film sets, you have to work on Sundays. That's never fun. But if you can take it and just still be thankful for the day and be like, I'm going to make sure I take a chance to listen to a sermon, to take some quiet time, because we're supposed to be worshiping God every day. But Sunday is a special day, and not just ignoring that and letting it fly by just because we're on a film set, I think is really, really good too. That helps us to be very focused and centered, and don't think that like when you're in the car driving from one place to the other, you always have to just like listen to music. Maybe you can listen to a quick sermon or maybe a podcast or something like that. They even have on the Bible app, it'll read to you. That's a really great thing too. Or sometimes it's another moment to just have quiet time and just be like, I'm just going to talk to the Lord while I drive.
One of the things that I've been encouraged with recently, challenged by, is, and not necessarily using the term Sabbath in the Jewish sense of like a specific time, but using the term Sabbath to understand a period of time that you're taking for the Lord, right? Taking a time of Sabbath is a direct protest to what the devil wants you to believe, right? That busyness is okay. Because busyness is forgetting, you're going to forget God as you get busier and busier. You forget about who he is. And so taking that time, dedicated time, whatever that looks like, days off are a great time for that. And sometimes you don't get those days off as much as you'd like. Mm-hmm. It's not every 7 days necessarily. It can be more frequent than that. It can be less frequent than that. But taking that specific time to say, God, I want you and I want to know you more. I want to be in relationship with you. It is taking the time to say, no, I'm not going to let myself forget who you are as my Savior. And part of that too is you talked about, right? We pull out our phones and we start scrolling. What do we most often scroll with? Social media. It's a reality. And I love social media. I absolutely have nothing wrong with social media. But one of the things that I would encourage, and I did a couple of times, not as many times as I probably should on set, was to just for at least a week or two on that set, depending on how long it is. It's easier if you're on shorter sets. Features, you're gone for a month off of social media. It can kind of be a little struggle. But even then, just deleting that off your phone for that time. And maybe it's that you're in lieu of that, right? So the idea of fasting of something is not an idea of total removal. It's an idea of replacement. And so when you take something out of your life, so social media for a time, that you're replacing it with something intentional. So not that you're just sitting there not thinking or something in that time, or you sit there and are playing it, oh, I got rid of social media. It's great, but I'm going to play Angry Birds instead. Like like there's those things, right? And part of the idea behind taking that intentional time to fast from something, which I think is helpful on set, is to say, I'm going to dedicate this time to the Lord. And maybe that's even your lunches. It's really healthy for sure to interact on set and things like that. But a lot of times we're in such constant interaction, you just need a moment to think, especially if you're an introvert. You have to you have to take that moment. And so there were times where I would go, and I had the luxury of the grip and electric truck I could go and hide in. But finding that place where, okay, it's an hour-long lunch usually. I'm gonna eat my food in 10, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna find some space to have some silence. And whatever it is in you that you do in that silence, whether it's time of prayer, whether it's kind of meditating and reading the word, things like that, really taking that time to be intentional. Because I think that's the biggest thing, is we need to force ourselves on set to be intentional. Sometimes it's a lot easier, right, Micah? You mentioned that it's a lot easier on set to be unintentional. And when you're at home, oh, well, I'm going to go to church, and I think the biggest thing I miss when I'm on set is I miss getting to go to small group and things like that during the week, a lot of those during the week relationships. So what is it, can you take a part of your lunch, schedule that call in advance to say, hey, can we call and I watched the sermon or, hey, this is what, having that interaction with someone at home. Because I think a lot of times too, it's hard for your church to interact with you when you come back and you've been gone for, especially if you're on features, right? And you're gone for an entire month. They're like, where did you go? And if you're able to kind of, for sure, engage when you're there, but even connect, how can you connect with your church body, even in that you're engaging, so that when you come back, you're able to plug right back in. And it's not as, I think it's a little nicer when you're outside of the film industry, right? And you're able to build a relationship at a church or something, and then you go into the film industry, right? Because people have known you for a long time, and you're able to just kind of go back and plug in. But especially if you like move to a new place, which was what I did, and then I started doing more film full time, I was having such a hard time. People were like, where'd you go? And I did a back-to-back feature once, and so it's like 2 months that I was gone, and they thought a lot of people were like, I thought you just had found a different church. And so also when you're at home, making sure, being very intentional to say, hey, by the way, I'm not just leaving. I'll let you know if I'm leaving. That kind of thing. Being very intentional about that time to say, this is what I'm here for. This is what I want to do while I'm here. I want to engage. I want to be a part of your lives, because to some extent I do have limited opportunity for that. And so I want to make the most of that.
No, totally. And I feel like for Andrew and I, so we do like commercial work, so it's anywhere from 3 to 9 days, of shooting and whatever with our crew and stuff when we do that. And a couple of things, I feel like I'm still really working on the personal side of like, okay, making sure I read scripture in the morning and pray and some of that stuff, still like working on that and trying to fit that in and like be intentional about it. But as a bigger picture, a couple things that Andrew and I really try to do is not work on Sundays, because we are in leadership for a smaller crew, like, okay, how can we make sure that we are not scheduling any shooting days on Sundays for our crew, even if it's inconvenient and means more, money spent on rental gear and stuff because it's over the weekend and whatever else. Sometimes there's still going to be travel or prep and stuff on a Sunday, but how can we intentionally not do like a full shoot day on a Sunday? So we don't work on Sundays. And then another thing that's been important to us is to try at the beginning of each shoot day to pray as a crew, like we get on set, everyone piles out of the vehicles, we're all standing up, okay, let's say a quick prayer before we hop into work. And again, we do commercial work, right? So like we have clients from all different walks of life and perspectives and backgrounds, and crew members from different backgrounds and stuff. But that is like an important part of who we are and who our company is, is just to give the day to the Lord. So and at mealtime too, if we can, if the opportunity comes up, like, if we're shooting a commercial for some local business or something, in this line of work, I mean, it's not like you're necessarily going to have the chance to overtly share the gospel with every single person you come in contact with, but it's more about how do you live your life, how you normally would live it. And like, well, at home, I would pray before a meal. So I'm going to do that on set, and I'm going to, do that at the beginning of the day or whatever. So those are some things that we've tried to incorporate, like on the spiritual side of like, how can we make sure that we're ahead of time deciding like, okay, Sundays we don't work, and trying to incorporate that prayer as a group when we're on set.
No one liked COVID. I get it. And no one liked wearing masks and stuff on set. But I will say, I probably had the most ministry conversations about Jesus, right, through wearing a mask, because I had a mask from CWVFF back in,
That's great.
and it said, be prayerful and careful, but not fearful. And I wore that, and the number of people that would just walk up to me and say, do you actually believe that? And want to have that conversation and lead into that, or it just opened because I was wearing something, right? And so I pushed so hard because I worked mostly during the COVID era. And I worked really hard, even though that it was like, oh, how can I get more of these? I remember asking Jonathan Schutz, can I get more of these? Because it was like, how can I be a light? So is it, a lot of times, especially in grip and electric, right? You're wearing black t-shirt, black pants, as dark as you can get. But what can you be doing that causes people to ask questions about your lifestyle in a positive way? I had people ask me, I worked on a lot of secular sets. And so I had people ask me, well, Micah, why do you react so well to scenarios? You just dropped a C-stand on your foot and nothing came out of your mouth. And I was like, well, and you have that opportunity. It opens up a door. I think one of the best sets I've ever been on, which was by far the most secular set, a movie that no one should watch. But it's one of those things where on that set, I sat down with other people, and we called it the triangle of questions. It was very interesting, but it was just one of those things where I walked in and I said, hey, can I ask you guys genuine questions about your life? And I said, and likewise, you can ask me anything you want to ask about. And I mean, we talked about because you're stressed, you're on the set with these people, they're getting to know you. I think it's fair, and it's really good when you get to have those opportunities, but opening up that door to be like, by the way, if you ever want to like ask me questions or anything, like you can ask anything about my life, which is kind of scary, right? Because you're opening yourself up, and what if they find my deepest, darkest secret, but when you open up like that, especially with like struggles, right? Because that's the first thing that you're like, oh, they're non-believing, they don't believe in Jesus. So we need to be careful. Like, don't mention sin struggles. We might sound like hypocrites. But honestly, that opens up so much of the door of like, when they're talking about how they are reacting in a scenario, they're just like, oh, I swear all the time, or this stuff is so bad for me. And I was like, well, you're giving opportunity for those kind of scenarios where it's like, why don't you swear, Micah? Well, because I believe this, but it's not to say that I don't genuinely struggle with that thought, right? Because no matter how much we've learned to be good at rejecting that, the reality is we've been around it enough, most likely, that it's not that it doesn't come into our head at some point. And we can, that's part of temptation. That's part of some of that stuff. But being genuine, I think, is a great door opener to being healthy on set, but also to being a light on set. Your struggle is your vantage point for the gospel. It is what you are able to share with other people to share Jesus.
I'm not really sure how to transition from that, but yeah, I guess kind of wrapping things up here, the final thing I wanted to touch on, like we touched quite a bit on like creating those healthy habits before you get on set, but now I want to kind of flip that around and like look at the whole aspect of like reacquainting yourself with non-set life, and how does that work with the physical and the mental and all that, and you're able to bounce back quick into normal life.
Well, you miss meetings.
What
You totally forget. That's one thing that happens. The day after coming back from set, you're like, oh yeah, I was supposed to be on this podcast.
What is reacclimation, really? I mean,
Yeah, I'm dealing with that right now. It's like, oh my goodness, how do you like, oh yeah, I'm home. What does that feel like again? It's hard. It takes a lot of transition, and especially like, again, we do shorter sets, but I can't imagine when you do features and stuff. We did a feature once as well, but like still, like when it's 6 to 8 weeks or whatever, like that's got to be hard.
I did 12 features in a year at one point, and that sounds crazy. Some of them were simultaneous, so that helped. I was being like a graphic artist, so I wasn't completely, but there was 2021, I wasn't home a whole lot. And so that was it was hard to reacclimate, because even for the times that I was home, it was like, when was I landing? But I think a lot of it, again, is that engagement side. Also, I haven't met a filmmaker yet that actually knows how to, they could be strong believer or anything like it. No one knows how to acclimate back. It's a kind of a hard part of gig economy, in the sense of how that works, is that you are working. And I think one of the sides, and I'm not sure that this is necessarily a healthy trend, but then you almost become a virtual community, that you're not having that physical relationship of people around you when you're at home. Not having a home base, I'm not sure I think that's a common trend, but I'm not sure it's a healthy trend of, okay, I'm attending virtual church, I'm connecting with my filmmakers that I know around the world, which are healthy relationships to maintain for sure. They're good things, but having a local community is extremely, not just people that you like in that local community, but people that are being real with you is the truth, that are going to say, and I had a couple of these people, and it was really helpful for me. But you come back from set, right? And they say, let's get coffee. How are you doing? And I think that's just it's hard to have the perspective, and not everyone gets that luxury per se, but fight for that luxury. Find those people that are going to be very intentional with you and are going to be in person. It's impossible to replace local community. It just is.
Yeah. I think you have to be really intentional with, acclimating back. And this is something that I'm still kind of figuring out, but I wonder if one possible thing that could help is, like jet lag. Like if you're flying to another country or something, it's like, okay, just get right into wake up at 8 o'clock. If you normally wake up at 8 o'clock or whatever, like get right into it. And like, obviously that you're going to need, a couple of days to maybe sleep in or whatever when you get back, but like kind of intentionally getting yourself back into that rhythm, having a rhythm before and getting back into it right away when you get back. It's easy for me because I'm usually so exhausted coming home to be like, for a good 3 to 5 days or a week, I'm just like, every day I'm like, okay, I just need to sleep in and eat convenience food and like, watch movies and do stuff because I'm so stressed. I need to just like build back up. But like, that's probably not the healthiest way. Like, how can I be diving back into those rhythms of like having that devotion time in the morning, going on walks, doing some of your rhythm is going to probably help you bounce back better into that. And it does take, that intentionality. But another thing too is like making sure, like having boundaries in your schedule. So when you come back home, if possible, you're having actually some time at home so you can get back in that rhythm. So you're not, as much as possible. I know this is not always possible with film sets and stuff, but trying to know yourself well enough that when you schedule things out, even if it's months in advance, knowing that, okay, if I only have a week in between things, I know myself that's not healthy for me. And it's going to be really hard for me to just not be super stressed about that. How can I make sure that I'm having a good 2 to 4 weeks at home or whatever it is that you need? So you can get back into that rhythm, and the community, like you were saying, Micah, like the local community and that type of thing, making sure that you are, even if you're exhausted, trying to make it back to church on Sunday when you're back, those types of things. Like, okay, how can I maintain that rhythm and have the boundaries for my schedule, make sure that I'm, not rushing off to the next thing. And it takes a lot of intentionality. It takes time to figure out how do you work. Also, because extrovert, introvert, there's a lot of big difference there. I'm an extrovert, my husband's an introvert. So when we get home, he's like, oh, so glad to be home. And I'm like on this valley because I was just on this mountaintop of all these people. And I'm just like so sad to be home. Not because I love being home, but like, I'm just like, oh my goodness, it's so quiet. And usually the house, is kind of messy stuff because you're just coming home from a big trip. And it just, everything's kind of like, there's no people. It's just a mess. Like, this is sad. There's nobody here to cook for me. I have to do it. There's no catering.
It's a
so
real
it's like,
thing.
okay, how are some ways that I can help myself acclimate? By maybe I could go out to coffee with a friend when I get back and, talk about the set and like verbally process and, kind of come off a little bit slower off that extrovert high. And making sure that we're each able to do that in a way that helps us to heal and to, like regain that rest and rejuvenation after being on set.
Yeah, I definitely need a lot of sleep when I get back. But like you said, you can't just like, sleep for like 12 hours every day. But yeah, making sure you rest your body when you get back physically. And then also try to get right back into the rhythm of I drink water every day. I try to make these healthy choices. Take it easy with your workouts, especially if you haven't been able to work out on the set. Like Hannah said, like definitely walks are really great. Getting out in fresh air, in sunlight, depending on what month it is and what state. But being able to have that fresh air and the sunlight on your skin. And then I would really recommend making sure you have like some sort of, I guess I say work scheduled when you get back, but light work. So, so you're not just, doing the, pajamas on the couch for 4 days with Netflix. Because that's not good for recouping either. It's okay to do a little bit, but having just some work scheduled, some very mild, light work, or maybe meeting with a friend. And then also when you talk, before you leave, if you can talk to your church family and be like, hey, I'm going to be gone for 2 months on this set. I've had little kids not recognize me before. I come back and they're just like, who are you? And I'm like, I come here. Because their time is a lot different than adults. But when you come back, then you can come right back and say like, hey, I'm here. I'm back. I want to be back involved in my church. And people aren't just like, wait, I thought you were gone. I think that's really important. Yeah, when the Sunday comes up, you're like, I'm going to try to be at church. Maybe I won't stay as late because I'm still exhausted, but I'm going to start plugging back in. And then also, I'm going to try to do a little bit of work so I don't just do nothing, and make sure you get that rest, because especially if you're going to go straight into another set, you need to get your body ready to do all of that again. But like Hannah said, I think it is, if at all possible, giving yourself some time between is, I think it's good for your performance overall. Um, Lack of sleep and also dehydration, both of those lower our performance level. It damages our decision making. We can't make as quick decisions. So many other things like that. So when we aren't conscious of our sleep and our water intake, we can actually perform at a much lower level. And that comes back to producers too, of making sure they plan their schedule so that their crew can sleep. Because like, what kind of performance do you want from your talent and your crew? Make sure you give them that time to recuperate. So yeah, I kind of just echoed all those things. They're all really good.
And Mike has heard this soapbox before. We talked about earlier with food and things being more expensive. Making sure you're paying, as producers, paying people enough, or paying them enough per diem and things like that, or paying them per diem period, that they can actually buy the things that they need to be healthy, and be able to actually use those expenditures, right? Make those expenditures. I loved what you were talking about, intentionality of like the extrovert side of coming off the high, because for me that was huge. And probably it's a reality, and there are people that deal with it way more than depression is a real thing, right? And it's a very common thing. I don't think I've ever felt depressed per se, which is great. It's a good thing. I'm not saying it is, but like probably the closest thing to depressed that I've ever been is coming off of a film set, because I loved it. I was around people. I was so excited, thrilled. I was like, oh, this is so good. And then I'd go off of film set and I'd come home and it would just be me. And I'm like, oh. Like I just wanted to cry. I just wanted to, and honestly, I wasn't the healthiest in this. I would watch a lot of TV and I'd spend time doing that. And I wouldn't, even though that I had some personal projects and things like that I could have worked on. I think it's helpful to try and find some external projects, because it's easy to come back and begin on your own personal projects or house projects or something like that you want to work on. But so much of that is like finding things that you can kind of do for other people that might be chill. Maybe it's something, at church, like church has something for to do. Maybe it's, hey, when I come back, can I clean the church, or whatever it is that you connect with well. So construction for me is very relaxing. I know it's not for everybody, but it was very one of those things where I had a friend who seemed to always, he had a lot of extra work, and so I would come back and I would not get paid for it. I just worked for free, but I'd go and I'd do something to help him out. And that again was that personal connection. It was something to do, but be intentional about things to do, because our bodies are made for work. It's part of it. Our bodies are not made to sit there and do nothing. And another part of health, right, in this whole thing is that when you physically work a lot, whether you're a producer, whether you're grip, electric, I know for grip and electric specifically, you're physically exerting a lot when you're on set. So when you come back and you just sit there for hours and hours and hours, your muscles are like, what is it? It's like culture shock, right? Where it's like, wait, we were working really hard and then now we're not. And then a week later you're working hard again and then you're not. And it's like, that's not how your body thrives on consistency. And so it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter whether you're an introvert, extrovert, that's how your body functions. And so it thrives on consistent sleep. It thrives on consistent water. It thrives on consistent exercise. So even in your relaxation, right, you're coming back, you may be sleeping a few more hours. You don't want to jump back in immediately to, your 4-mile runs and your, things like you want to take it easy, but you also want to get back into that. And maybe it's, okay, when I'm at home for 3, I'm taking a 4-mile run. Okay, I'm going to take a half-mile run. And that's what it takes to integrate back in, or lifting weights or whatever it is, taking it easy, right? But building up to a point where, okay, you're getting that, you're using the energy. And I think a lot of times we're like, we need to, or at least I had this, maybe this isn't everybody, but I need to build up the energy level. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to watch TV, or I'm going to read a book, or I'm going to do something like that. I'm going to build up my energy. Introvert or extrovert, the way we build energy is through the food we eat, the water we drink, and the exercises we do. Like how our body is being active is how we build energy. And also how we expend energy, because our body is built to expend energy. And if we don't expend it, it's just like building up and building up and building up. And I know several friends, I didn't deal with this as much, partly because I had health side, right? I had sleep apnea, so I wasn't really, and I wasn't treated in that. So I wasn't dealing with sleep well. I wasn't sleeping. But a lot of people found that they would come back home and they weren't working during the day. And so they couldn't sleep at night. So they'd stay up till 3 a.m. or something like that. And they would be waking up at 6 because they weren't using the energy, that the excess energy that they were used to, building. They're just bottled up. And so they were having trouble sleeping and things like that. But there's a lot of factors. Yeah. When you're at home, schedule is probably the biggest. Schedule.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode of the show, but thank you all for coming on and taking the time today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Micah. Yeah, I think this is so important for people to be talking about. So I appreciate you, doing this. So.
And with that, we are going to wrap up season 6 of the Producer Podcast. Stay tuned for more Producer Podcast highlights coming this summer, as well as season 7 of the show coming this fall. Until then, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.